Count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord has done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God has done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings and see what God has done. And this one is Lithe, I don't know. And it looks like it is eyeshadow. Very cool. I was going to say the little mirror is foggy, but never mind. I figured it out. It's got a thingy over it. And this is kind of pretty. Angel will like that. It's the merriest time of the year. It's kind of pretty. Oh, look, stuff. Peace on Earth. That's kind of fun. An envelope. I'm guessing this is scrapping stuff. I have not done scrapping in years. I stopped doing photographs. Very merry. Oh, that's cool. Here is some notes, pads, thought pads. All is calm, all is bright. Oh, this one's cool. That one's cool. 'Tis the season. Oh, gift list. I was going to say for, graph paper. That's what I was going to say. I couldn't remember what it was called. Oh, some stickers. And more stickers. Gift tags, I think those ones are. Oh, hi Ursula, like witchy. Oh, that's fun. Your future looks so bright. Oh, this is cool. Will do. That's helpful. Oh, and a calendar. Very cool. More stickers. And, of course, the calendars, which is kind of fun. Making seasons bright. Memories of this season. Oh, that's kind of cool. There is so much to celebrate, which is cool. Got an owl on it and a fox. And you'll like that. And things to do, days until Christmas. Oh, it's a make spirits bright. And that's what's in that envelope. Trust in magic, which is a big thing in our household. And then looks like journal pages, which are fun. Those are very cool. It's like a daily journal or daily activity guide or some kind of activity tracker anyway. Adventures. Always believe in something wonderful. Fight for what you believe in. Yes, I agree. Never stop making wishes. I also agree. Do more of what makes your soul shine. Also agree. Never forget how wildly capable you are. I am not afraid. I like how it shows villains. They're definitely not afraid. Not role models, but definitely not afraid. That's a calendar. Ooh, perfectly wretched. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not. And there to begin. Again, we got some villains here. And calendar. Alright then. Interesting. I will have to figure out how to use this. I'm not usually this organized. Despite David's autism, we've never quite succeeded when it comes to organization or schedules or anything that looks like we know what the frick we're doing. But thank you, Miss Heather. I do appreciate it. It's wonderful. And wonderful. And I will be sending something back as soon as I figure out what I can send you. Everybody else, please enjoy the video. Like, share, comment, and have a good day. Welcome to Wayback Wednesday. I hope you all had a wonderful Veterans Day. If you're a veteran, thank you for your services. If you're not a veteran, make sure to thank them for their services. Today's video is about an island. Hopefully you enjoyed this little bit of history. But before we travel to an island and pretend we're all immigrants. Oh wait, we are. Sorry, I forgot. We're going to do a little bit of a shout out. Now today we don't have a race. Today we have a from Miss Heather. Apparently, I won a reward in a members video, which is very cool and very awesome. And I plan on returning something to Miss Heather as soon as I figure out what I want to return. But so it might be in December, but it will get done. Are you ready? Here we go. Wait, I told you who it was before I did the shout out. Anyway, let's do this again. Ready? Here we go. Shout out time. Here's a shout out just for you. You support me, so I support you. The shout out is for our friends. Let's see who it is today. Oh wait, we already know because I did it backwards. It's Miss Heather. Who sent me a box? Give me a minute. I'll open the box. Okay. For those of you who are not familiar with Miss Heather, she is at 4.44K. And look, 3 4s. It's an angel number, as Angel would say. Budget-friendly crafts and makeup tips. No spend burr. That would never work. That's when I pay buy most of my Christmas presents, just because usually that's when I get my bonus. But she's got Crafty Chat, Hard to Weed, Ipsy, makeup bundles. She's also got some shorts with her doggo and plants and some of her crafts as well. And of course, lives. Thanksgiving projects, crafting ideas. So if you makeup into crafts, into Circuit, which is a thingy that she used to do most of her crafts, check out Miss Heather. She's wonderful, very supportive. Like, share, comment, and let's see what's in the box. Hold on. Okay, it says, thank you so, your support means the world to me, Miss Heather. We'll keep that. That's very cool. And we've got a lip gloss I will be giving Miss Angel because I cannot wear this stuff. And don't probably get most of this, to be fair. And we've got a...
Silly Mommy?
No. Blush, liquid. I don't know what this is, but Angel will. Okay, that is what this is. Angel will know how to use that. That's kind of cool, though. Alright, everybody. The Bearded Historian is going to tell you a wonderful bit of history, or a silly bit of history, or something that's historical in some sort of odd way.
We like to say things are odd, but then again, sometimes things are even. But that's beside the point.
Never.
Never. Now, off the happy list that my wife has blessed me with, there was a few things that, stood out, but I decided to take and have some fun with the last topic because this place closed on this date a number of years ago. But it's also kind of interesting to see how much of an effect this one island had on us. The island in question sits in the New York Harbor.
Island of Misfit Toys?
Kind of. Misfit humans. It's within the states of New Jersey and New York. It's owned by the U.S. government. And at one time, it was the busiest immigrant inspection and processing station in the U.S. From 1892 to 1954, nearly 12 million immigrants arriving at the port of New York and New Jersey were processed there. What approximately 40% of Americans may be descended from these immigrants. Of course, we're talking about Ellis Island. Interestingly enough, it has been part of the Statue of Liberty National Monument since 1965, accessible by the public only by ferry. In the north side of the island is a National Museum of Immigration, while the south side of the island, including the Ellis Island Immigrant Hospital, is open to public through guided tours.
Ooh, let's do that.
Yes. Has a square acreage of 27.5 and has a whopping a whopping elevation of 7 feet. So it's literally right up off of the water. The main building is built in 1900 and the hospital built in 1911. We'll go into a little bit of details on that in a little bit. But to kick it all off, to think of, the name derives from Samuel Ellis, a Welshman who bought the island in 1774. In the 19th century, Ellis Island was the site of Ford Gibson and later became a naval magazine. Well, the first inspection station opened in 1892, but it was destroyed by fire in 1897. The second station would open in 1900 and house facilities for medical quarantines and processing immigrants. Well, after 1924, Ellis Island was used primarily as a detention center for migrants. During both World War I and II, its facilities were also used by the U.S. military to detain prisoners of war. Now, after the immigration station's closure, the buildings would languish for several years until they were partially reopened in 1976. The main building and the adjacent structures were completely renovated into a museum in 1990. Now, the 27.5-acre island was expanded by land reclamation between the late 1890s and the 1930s, and at one point actually consisted of 3 islands numbered 1, 2, and 3. Now, jurisdictional disputes between the states of New Jersey and New York, who are always fighting, wound up going all the way to the Supreme Court in 1998. Supreme Court ruled that while most of the island is in New Jersey, the natural portion of the island on the northern end is an exclave of New York.
Ah.
The northern half of Ellis Island comprises of former Island 1 and includes the main building, several ancillary structures, and the Wall of Honor. The hospital structures on the island's southern half occupy the former sites of Islands 2 and 3, and there is a ferry building between Ellis Island's northern and southern halves. Now, historically, immigrants were subject to medical and primarily inspections, and they could be detained or deported. The island is commemorated through the Ellis Island Medal of Honor, and it has received several federal, state, and municipal landmark designations. Now, excuse me.
Oops.
Go back to the Wayback Machine, and this island predates all the way back to, when the end of the Wisconsin glaciation about 15,000 years ago, created by retreating glaciers. The island was described as a hummock among the plain fronting of the west side of the Hudson River estuary, and when the glaciers melted, the water of the upper New York Bay surrounded the mass. The native Mohegan name for the island was Koshik, meaning Gull Island, in reference to Ellis Island's former large population of seagulls. Excuse me. Koshik was comprised mostly of marshy, brackish lowlands that disappeared underwater at high tide. The Native American tribes who lived nearby are presumed to have been hunter-gatherers who used the island to hunt for fish and oysters, as well as to build transient hunting and fishing communities there. It's unlikely the Native Americans established permanent settlements on Koshik, since the island would have been submerged at high tide. Bloop.
Bloop, bloop.
Well, in 1630, the Dutch bought Koschek as a gift for Michael Reniers Pauw, who helped found the New Netherlands settlement. When the Dutch settled the area as part of New Netherland, the three islands in the upper New York Bay, Liberty, Black Tom, and Ellis Islands, were given the name Oyster Islands, alluding to the large oyster population nearby. The present-day Ellis Island was thus called Little Oyster Island, a name that persisted throughout the early 1700s. Now, during the early colonial period, sometime, Maryland merchant named Isaac Beddoe purchased the island. The Little Oyster Island was then sold to Captain William Dyer, 1674, then to Thomas Lloyd on April 23rd, 1686. The island was sold several more times, including to Enoch and Mary Story, and during colonial times, Little Oyster Island became a popular spot for hosting oyster roasts, picnics, and clam bakes because of its rich oyster beds. The evidence of recreational uses on the island were visible by the mid-18th century with the addition of commercial buildings to the northeast shore. Now, by the 1760s, Little Oyster Island became a public execution site for pirates, with executions occurring on one tree in particular, the gibbet tree. However, there is scant evidence that this was a common practice. Little Oyster Island was acquired by Samuel Ellis, a colonial New Yorker and merchant from Wrexham, Wales, in 1774. The island was ultimately named for him, and he unsuccessfully attempted to sell the island 9 years later. Well, he died in 1794, and per his will, the ownership of the island passed to his daughter, Catherine Westervelt's unborn son, who was also named Samuel. When Junior Samuel died shortly after birth, ownership passed to the senior Samuel's other two daughters, Elizabeth Ryerson and Rachel Cooter. Now, Ellis Island also was used as a military base for nearly 80 years, and by the mid-1790s, as a result of the United States' increased military tensions with Britain and France, the U.S. Congress Committee drew a map of possible locations for the first system of fortifications to protect the major American urban centers, such as New York Harbor. A small part of Ellis Island from the soil from high to low waters marked around Ellis Island was owned by the city. On April 21st, 1794, the city deeded the land to the state for public defensive purposes. The following year, the state allotted $100,000 for fortifications on Bedloes, Ellis, and Governor's Islands, as well as the construction of the Castle Garden, now Castle Clinton, along the battery of Manhattan Island. Batteries and magazines were built on Ellis Island in preparation for a war. A jetty was added to the northwestern extremity of the island, possibly from soil excavated from an inlet at the northeastern corner. The inlet was infilled in 1813. Through the military threat that never materialized, further preparations were made in the late 1790s when the quasi-war sparked fear of war with France. These new preparations were supervised by Ebenezer Stevens, and the military conflict also failed to occur, and by 1805 the fort had become run down. Now, Stevens, who observed the Ellis family still owned most of the island, suggested selling off the island to the federal government. Samuel Ryerson, one of Samuel Ellis's grandsons, deeded the island to John A. Berry in 1806. The remaining portion of the island was acquired by condemnation the next year and was ceded to the United States on June 30th, 1808 for $10,000. Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Williams, placed in charge of New York harbor defenses in the early 1800s, proposed several new fortifications around the harbor as part of the second system of fortifications. The new fortifications included increased firepower and improved weaponry. The War Department established a circular stone 14-gun battery, a mortar battery of possibly 6 mortars, magazine, and barracks. The fort was initially crowned a crown fort, but by the end of the War of 1812, the battery was named Fort Gibson in honor of Colonel James Gibson of the 4th Regiment of Riflemen, who was killed in a war during the siege of Fort Erie. The fort was not used in combat during the war, and instead served as a barracks for the 11th Regiment, as well as a jail for British prisoners of war.
Woo.
Immediately after the end of the war of 1812, Fort Gibson was largely used as a recruiting depot. The fort went into decline after underuse, and was being jointly administered by the Army and Navy in the mid-1830s. Around that time, 1834, the extant portion of Ellis Island was declared to be an exclave of New York within the waters of New Jersey. The era of joint administration was short-lived as the Army took over the fort's administration in 1841, demoted the fort to an artillery battery, and stopped garrisoning the fort, leaving a small Navy guard outside the magazine. Here, Navy, you can have one.
Well,
By 1854, Battery Gibson contained an 11-gun battery, 3 naval magazines, a short railroad line, and several auxiliary structures such as a cookhouse, gun carriage house, and officers' quarters. The Army continued to maintain the fort until 1860, when it was abandoned the weapons at Battery Gibson. The artillery magazine was expanded in 1861 during the Civil War, and part of the parapet was removed. At the end of the Civil War, the fort declined again, and this time to the extent that the weaponry was rendered unusable.
uh-oh.
Throughout the 1870s, the Navy built additional buildings for its artillery magazine on Ellis Island, eventually constructing 11 buildings in total. Complaints about the island's magazine started to form, and by the 1870s, the New York Sun was publishing alarming reports about the magazines. The guns were ordered removed in 1881, and the island passed under the complete control of the Navy's Bureau of Ordnance. Well, the Army had unsuccessfully attempted to use Ellis Island for the convalescence for immigrants as early as 1847. Across the New York harbor, Castle Clinton had been used as an immigration station since 1855, processing more than 8 million immigrants during that time.
Wow.
The individual states had their own very immigration laws until 1875, but the federal government regarded Castle Clinton as having varied charges of mismanagement, abuse of immigrants, and evasion of the laws, and as such wanted to be completely replaced. The federal government assumed control of the immigration in early 1890 and commissioned a study to determine the best place for the new immigration station in New York Harbor. Among members of the United States Congress, there were disputes on whether to build the station on Ellis, Governor's, or Liberty Islands. Initially, Liberty Island was selected as the site for the immigration station, but due to opposition for immigration stations on both Liberty and Governor's Islands, the committee eventually decided to build the station on Ellis. Since Castle Clinton's lease was about to expire, Congress approved a bill to build an immigration station on Ellis Island. On April 11, 1890, the federal government ordered the magazine at Ellis Island to be torn down to make way for the U.S. first federal immigration station at the site. The Department of the Treasury, which was in charge of constructing federal buildings in the U.S., officially took control of the island that May 24th. Congress initially allotted $75,000, or about $2.6 billion in our money today, to construct the station, later doubled that appropriation. While the building was being constructed, the barge office at the battery was also used for immigrant processing. During construction, most of the old Battery Gibson buildings were demolished, and Ellis Island's land size was almost doubled to 6 acres. The main structure of the 2-story structure was made of Georgia pine, which is later described in Harper's Ferry as a latter-day watering place hotel, measuring 400 by 150 feet. Its outbuildings included a hospital, detention building, laundry building, and a utility plant that were all made of wood. Some of the former stone magazine structures were reused for utilities and offices. Additionally, a ferry slip with breakwater was built to the south of Ellis Island. Following further expansion, the island would measure 11 acres by the end of 1892. Now, the station opened on January 1st, 1892. The first immigrant was Annie Moore, a 17-year-old girl from Cork, Ireland, who was traveling with her 2 brothers to meet their parents in the U.S. On that first day, almost 700 immigrants passed through the docks.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah. Now, over the next year, over 400,000 immigrants were processed at the station. The processing procedure included a series of medical and mental inspection lines, and through the process, some 1% of potential immigrants were deported. Additional building improvements took place through the mid-1890s, and Ellis Island was expanded to 14 acres by 1896. The last improvements, which entailed the installation of underwater telephone and telegraph cables to Governor's Island, were completed in early 1897. Now, on June 15th that year, the wooden structures of Ellis Island were razed in a fire of unknown origin.
Uh-oh.
While there were no casualties, the wooden buildings were completely burned down after only 2 hours, and all immigration records from 1855 had been destroyed. Over 5 years of operation, the station had processed 1.5 million immigrants.
A lot of immigrants.
Yeah. Now, following the fire, excuse me, passengers' arrivals again were processed by the barge office, which was soon unable to handle the large volume of immigrants. Within 3 days of the fire, the federal government made plans to build a new fireproof immigration station. Legislation.
Well, good luck with that one.
Good luck, yeah. Legislation to rebuild the station was approved on June 30th, 1897, and appropriations were made in mid-July. By September, the Treasurer's supervising architect, James Knox Taylor, opened the architecture competition to rebuild the immigration station. The competition was second to be conducted under the Tarsney Act of 1893, which had permitted private architects to design federal buildings rather than the government architects in the supervising architect's office. The contest rules specified that the main building with annexes and a hospital building, both made of fireproof materials, should be built in each nomination. Furthermore, the buildings had to be able to host a daily average of 1,000 and a maximum of 4,000 immigrants. Now, several prominent architectural firms filled proposals, and by December it was announced that Edward Lippincott Tilton and William A. Boring had won the competition.
The Boring person won?
The Boring plan with Tilton was called for 4 new structures: a main building in the French Renaissance style, as well as the kitchen, laundry building, powerhouse, and the main hospital building. The plan also included the creation of a new island called Island 2, upon which the hospital would be built south of the existing island, now Ellis Island's north side. A construction contract was awarded to the R.H. Hood Company in August of 1898 with the expectation that construction would be completed within a year, but the problem encountered delays because of various obstacles and disagreements between the federal government and the Hood Company, of course. A separate contract to build the 3.33-acre Island 2 had to be approved by the War Department because it was in New Jersey's waters, and that contract was completed by December of 1898. The construction cost ultimately totaled $1.5 million. Now, the new immigration station opened on December 17, 1900 without ceremony, and on that day, 2,251 immigrants were processed. Almost immediately, additional projects commenced to improve the main structure, including an entrance canopy, baggage conveyor, and railroad ticket office. The kitchen, laundry, and powder house, started construction in May 1900, were completed by the end of 1901. A ferry house also built between Islands 1 and 2 in 1901. The hospital, originally slated to be opened in 1899, was not completed until November of 1901, mainly due to serious funding delays and construction disputes. Facilities proved barely able to handle the flood of immigrants that arrived, and as early as 1903, immigrants had to remain in their transatlantic boats for several days while inspection had backlogs. Several wooden buildings were erected by 1903, including waiting rooms and a 700-bed barracks, and by 1904, over $1 million worth of improvements were proposed. The hospital was expanded from 125 to 250 beds in February of 1907, and a new psychopathic ward debuted in November of the same year.
Psychopathic ward?
Psychopathic. That's what
What
they
the
have.
hell does that mean?
I have not. For crazy people? I don't know.
Why are we warding them instead of just putting them back in a boat?
That's up to you to decide at the government.
I'm confused.
Also constructed was an administration building adjacent to the hospital. Now, Immigration Commissioner William Williams, what a name, made substantial changes to Ellis Island's operations, and during his tenure from 1902 to 1905 and from 1909 to 1913, Ellis Island processed its peak number of immigrants. Williams also made changes to the island's appearance, adding plants and grading paths upon the once barren landscape, and under Williams' supervision, a 4.75-acre third island was built to accommodate a proposed contagious diseases ward, separating the existing facilities by 200 feet of water.
I mean, great idea. Let's keep them separate. But also, why are we keeping them?
Because they wanted to come here in the first place. How they got sick on the trip, I don't know.
I'm just saying, if they had a contagious disease and they're on the ship
Leave them on the ship?
Yes.
Now, back here it says, as Island 3, as it was called, was located in the south of Island 2 and separated from that island by a now infilled ferry basin. The government bought the underwater area for Island 3 from New Jersey in 1904, and a contract was awarded in April of 1905. The islands were all connected via crib walk on their western sides, later covered with a wood canopy, giving Ellis Island an overall E shape. Upon completion of the Island 3 in 1906, Ellis Island covered 20.25 acres. A baggage and dormitory building was completed in 1908 to 1909, and the main hospital was expanded in 1909. Alterations were made to the registry building and dormitories as well, but even this was insufficient to accommodate the high volume of immigrants. In 1911, Williams alleged that Congress had allocated too little for improvements to Ellis Island, even though the improvement budget that year was $868,000.
So we're keeping people instead of processing them. We're sending them back.
Additional improvements and routine maintenance were completed in the early 1910s, and a greenhouse was built in 1910, and the Contagious Diseases Ward on Island 3 opened the following June. In addition, an incinerator was replaced in 1911, and the Recreation Center, operated by the American Red Cross, was also built on Island 2 in 1915. These facilities generally following the design set by Tilton and Boring. While the Black Tom explosion occurred on Black Tom Island in 1916, the complex suffered moderate damage. Although all immigrants were evacuated safely, the main building's roof collapsed and windows were broken. The main building's roof was replaced with a Gustavino-tiled arched ceiling by 1918. The immigration station was temporarily closed during World War I, from 1917 to 1919, during which time the facilities were used as a jail for suspected enemy combatants and later as a treatment center for wounded American soldiers. Immigration inspections were conducted aboard ships or at docks, and during the war, immigration processing at Ellis Island declined by 97%.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
maybe we can handle it now.
Yeah, from 878,000 immigrants per year in 1914 to only 26,000 per year in 1919.
That sounds good.
Yeah. Ellis Island's immigration station was reopened in 1920. The processing had rebounded to 560,000 immigrants per year by 1921. There were still ample complaints about the inadequate condition of Ellis Island's facilities. However, despite a request for $5.6 million in appropriations in 1921, aid was slow to materialize, and initial improvement work was restricted to smaller projects such as the infilling of the basin between Islands 2 and 3. Other improvements included rearranging features such as the staircases to improve pedestrian flow. These projects were supported by President Calvin Coolidge, who in 1924 requested that Congress approve $300,000 in appropriations for the island. The allocations were not received until the late 1920s. Now, with the passing of the Emergency Quota Act of 1921, the number of immigrants being allowed into the U.S. declined greatly, ending the era of mass immigration.
Which is probably a good thing.
Yeah. Following the Immigration Act of 1924, strict immigration quotas were enacted, and Ellis Island was downgraded from a primary inspection center to an immigrant detention center, hosting only those who were to be detained or deported. Final inspections were now instead conducted on board ships in the New York harbor. The Wall Street crash of 1929 further decreased immigration, as people were now discouraged from immigrating to the U.S. Because of the resulting decline in patient counts, the hospital closed in 1930. Edward Corsi, who himself was an immigrant, became Ellis Island's commissioner in 1931 and commenced an improvement program for the island. The initial improvements were utilitarian, focusing on such aspects as sewage, incineration, and power generation. In 1933, a federal committee led by Secretary of Labor Francis Perkins was established to determine what operations and facilities needed improvement. The committee's report, released in 1934, suggested the construction of a new class segregated immigration building, recreation center, ferry house, verandas, doctors' and nurses' quarters, as well as the installation of a new seawall around the island. These works were undertaken by the Public Works Administration funding and the Works Progress Administration labor, and were completed by the late 1930s. As part of the project, the Surgeon House and Recreation Center were demolished, and the Edward Lanning commissioned some murals for the island's buildings. Other improvements included the demolition of the greenhouse, the completion of the infilling of the basins between 2 and 3, and various landscaping activities such as the installation of walkways and plants. However, because of the steep decline in immigration, the immigration building went unused for several years, and it was starting to deteriorate. Now, with the start of World War II in 1939, Ellis Island was again used by the military, this time by the U.S. as a Coast Guard base. This World War I, the facilities were used to detain enemy soldiers in addition to immigrants, and the hospital was used to treat American soldiers. So many combatants were detained at Ellis Island that the administrative offices were moved to mainland Manhattan in 1943, and Ellis Island was used solely for detainment. In 1947, shortly after the end of World War II, there was a proposal to close Ellis Island due to the massive expenses needed for the upkeep of the relatively small detention center. The hospital was closed in 1950-51 by the United States Public Health Service, and by the early 1950s there were only 30 to 40 detainees left on the island. The island's closure was announced mid-1954 when the federal government announced that it would construct a replacement facility on Manhattan. Ellis Island would close November 12, 1954, with the departure of its last detainee, Norwegian merchant seaman Arne Peterson, who had been arrested for overstaying a shore leave. At the time, it was estimated that the government would save $900,000 a year from closing the island. The ferry boat Ellis Island, which had operated since 1904, stopped operating 2 weeks later. Now, since the closing of the island, several key factors came into play. First of all, it was named to the National Register of Historic Places. We've seen several of those here in western South Dakota. On October 15, 1966, the official name, the Statue of Liberty National Monument, Ellis Island and Liberty Island, big long name.
Big long name.
You have the New Jersey Register of Historic Places. The happened in 1971, May 27th, reference number 1535. And then the New York City landmark from the district individual interior took place on November 16th in 1983, so just in a couple days. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the big thing to think about, again, you think about all the people that came through that place. And, they had to go through processing, they had to be checked to make sure they weren't, contagious, they didn't have any, anything that was, nasty symptoms. You think about what happened after World War I, when you have the Spanish flu come through, and it spread, and they had such a problem fighting. After that, the government almost kind of had a form of paranoia. They wanted to make sure whatever was coming into the country wasn't already going to harm us, that we're already here.
Which is a great idea. It's just it took them too long to do it. I understand wanting to do evaluations of the people and it taking a couple of days. Yeah. But if it takes more than a week...
And then the fact is, they're already going to be sitting out on the boat for a week. Of course, congratulations. If it takes 5 days for you to die of whatever you're catching, right. Congratulations. Just let the boat float away. But, the other thing is that, when you go back to that first stat line, 40% of the people in this country can be tied back to Ellis Island. That's a heck of a number.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's our little history piece for the day. And, folks, have fun. We'll be throwing you some additional goodies up.
We will?
On. Yes.
Why?
Because we want to have some fun with these people.
Oh, no.
I know.
How horrid.
How horrid. Especially after a boy had a birthday party and we had Veterans Day. They're going to get tired of hearing this from us.
Thursday we'll probably do Just Dance. Mm-hmm. Friday we'll throw up another video. I mean, they're going to get... They're really good. By the end of the year, they're just going to want to be done with us.
No kidding. I have to take up like watching Palm or something. Palm reruns. But anyway, you folks have a good one. We'll see you next week.
Bye.